It's June 29th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, this weekend had a bunch of fights. There'll be more than one video from this weekend's actions. Let's start with the Deontay Wilder fight. Right? He fought Tyrrell Herndon. I thought it was an intriguing fight. I think the boxing narrative is way off. But before I get into the fighters, let me praise the referee, Ray Corona. Understand, Herndon, who fought a decent fight, was trying to buy time, was trying to move away from Deontay Wilder, who was throwing big shots, right? So he, of course, would fall to the canvas. You know, there are moments where the fighters would get a little bit tied up with each other. Wilder's throwing these big shots and moving away from Wilder, wanting to buy time, needing to get Wilder from right in front of him to survive the sequence, quite frankly. Herndon would, in effect, take a knee. But the way he would do it is he would just fall to the canvas. Ray Corona was having none of it. Folks, this is an A-plus refereeing job. Corona correctly called multiple slips. He would not call them knockdowns. He would call it a slip, right? You got the feeling Herndon didn't care whether it was called a knockdown or not. He's just trying to avoid being pinned by Deontay Wilder, right? Wilder's in front of him. Herndon realized he's being overwhelmed. Let's be clear here. A tall fighter like Herndon isn't accustomed to fighting a 6'7" fighter. I thought Corona did a great job, and I know this will get blowback in the comment section. I thought he did a great job refereeing a sloppy fight and properly ruling multiple slips and making sure everyone in the arena knew he was calling it a slip. I thought he did an excellent job. Now let's talk about Wilder. Folks, you know I'm biased. I don't want to confuse anyone in thinking that, I'm a We Are the World guy. I believe life's unfair. I believe smart people realize it. I think, in boxing there are two groups. There's the heavyweight champ, and then there's everyone else. Right? I'm interested in the biggest fights. You talk to the casual sports fan, they know heavyweight champs going back to the 60s. Even though we've had some great fighters in other weight classes, people don't remember Carlos Monzon. They don't remember, greats from, let's say, the light heavyweight division and stuff like that, right? The lightweight division, Flagweather, a bellwether division. They don't really remember the names. They might know one, Roberto Duran, but they don't really know others, right? With heavyweights, you do. Right? The guy off the street knows who Joe Louis is. Right? People know who Jack Dempsey was. And understand, Dempsey, of course, was a champ in the 20s. Deontay Wilder has worked on his game. This is not the older fighter looking for a paycheck. You knew that just looking at him. We mentioned this in an earlier video. Folks, you couldn't find any baby fat on him. This is the guy who is working out. He's in great shape. understand too, while he's been in a lot of fights that involved knockdowns or knockouts, he was the one doling out the punishment. He wasn't the one getting the punishment. Okay, sure. We can look at the second and third Tyson Fury fights. We can look at the Zhilei Zhang fight. Folks, what's that? 3 fights? Let's not get confused. He lost the Joe Parker fight, but he went 12 rounds. I mean, he went the distance in that fight. Let's get real here. Wilder is young for his age. Right? He's not a guy who's taken a lot of protracted beatings. So here he is, and folks, I know this is not the narrative. We're gamblers. We don't care about the narrative. I've been making money off Google, which still has a PE below 20, right? While I'm hearing about how, it shouldn't be as highly rated as it is, right? I'm looking for bargains. I'm not looking to pay full price. I want the guy who's been underestimated, who's been written off, who's coming off a bad performance. So everyone is going to sum up his career by what happened in the Zhilei Zhang fight. Right? For the record, I believe that Riyadh season knows boxing. I believe they, just like they've put Shakur Stevenson in with William Zepeda, right? Zepeda is the worst kind of opponent for Shakur Stevenson because Zepeda is going to come find him, right? Is going to force him to fight. They put Deontay Wilder in with Joe Parker, who has ring coverage and who has a wealth of experience. Right? Understand, Joe Parker has fought Andy Ruiz. He's fought Anthony Joshua. He's fought Hughie Fury. He's fought Dillian White. He's fought Martin Bakole now, after the Deontay Wilder fight. He's been on the world stage for years. He's one of the heavyweight division's best athletes, and he has ring coverage. How far away from Martin Bakole was Joe Parker when he landed the knockdown punch? Right? Zhilei Zhang is even more complicated. Right? Zhilei Zhang is a southpaw. He has power in both hands. He dropped Philippe Ergovic and he dropped Joe Joyce off right hands. Right? Zhilei Zhang is underrated. Understand, the only time we've seen Zhilei Zhang really get deconstructed was the Ajit Kabayel fight. Right? There's an open question now on whether Zhang can take body shots. Other than Kabayel, who's going to be able to get to his body in the heavyweight division? Just food for thought, right? So here, by the way, I'm looking at Zhilei Zhang fights as an opportunity. Because, of course, I see Zhilei Zhang have the worst fight of his career. I'll agree there are parts of the Jerry Forrest fight that look terrible, right, in the later rounds. But let's just say Zhilei Zhang's coming off probably his career worst performance. Many of these pundits are going to write him off, right? They're going to say, oh, Zhilei Zhang's in decline. They're going to look at the calendar. They're going to see he's an older fighter, right? Coming off a bad, loss, bad-looking loss. And they're going to, feel that he can't continue. When you and I know this is a dangerous man. Styles make fights. I personally don't think that there's the fighter out there at heavyweight who can beat everyone. Right? I feel Usyk lost the first Dubois fight. Right? I think Dubois, who curiously, and to me it was the most disappointing part of the fight, allowed Usyk to get back in it. Now that Dubois is a little bit more experienced, I'm sure he's embarrassed by the tape. Right? Whatever the ref's doing, you knock a man down, the guy gets up, he's diminished. Right? You put your foot on the gas. You force him to beat you with power shots, not jabs. Well, let's get back to this fight, the Wilder fight. Folks, Wilder, who has changed trainers, has worked hard on his game. Right before, Wilder was a sniper. Wilder would be in the ring, he would be hanging out with you, he would look for a moment of weakness, and then Wilder would throw a straight, and it was straight. He would throw a straight right hand and take you out. Right? That's the Wilder we grew up with. This current guy comes in, and folks, he's more dangerous. Not less, he's more dangerous. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, he's in shape. Number two, this is the guy who's prepared to go several rounds with you. Right? This isn't the slugger who's only there for a 4-round fight. Right? Wilder in round 7 of this fight looked like he was, starting the fight in round 1. Right? Understand that last Tyson Fury fight, made it 10, 11 rounds? So you're in for a full work day against Deontay Wilder. Don't you know that? Now he's there. He's throwing a jab, right? He's not just standing around trying to figure out your punch pattern so he can time a straight right hand. No, now he's keeping you busy. Right? Before they gave him the slow rounds, right? I still don't know what the deal was with the scoring in either fight against Luis Ortiz. Now he's actually trying to earn the slow rounds. So he comes in. I'm not saying his jab's a stiff jab. Right? I'm not saying he's Virgil Ortiz on the jab. But folks, watch him. He's throwing a jab. In other words, you're terrified. Right? You're in the first round. You're looking up. You're saying, man, this dude's bigger than I thought. And of course, it's different. You saw him at the weigh-in or at some PR thing, and he looked big, and you thought, whatever. Suddenly, here it is fight night, and you're looking at him, and you're comparing him to the other people you fought. That's when reality strikes, and you realize, man, I haven't fought anyone this tall. So while you're terrified, while your, game plan is to avoid getting hit with a straight right because you understand Wilder, more than most, only has to be right once. So while you're terrified, Wilder is taking advantage of the opportunity now. Wilder's in there, and Wilder's hitting you with a jab. Now with Joe Parker, who has foot speed and timing, can actually be moving outside, can actually make it hard for you to find him with a jab. How many heavyweights can do that? The answer is not many. So here is Wilder. You're at an acute risk of being knocked out as it is. Now, while the rounds are slow, while you're looking at him and he's looking at you and both fighters are trying to get comfortable, he's hitting you with a jab, folks. He's doing enough to actually win the slow rounds. Folks, he's dominating this fight against Herndon. I'm not saying Herndon is some big giant killer. I'm aware of the fact that Herndon fought other guys, Richard Torres, Effie Ajaba, and got blown out. right? I'm aware of that fact. But the bottom line is Herndon is here. He's moving. He's trying to survive, right? And in a fight where Wilder doesn't get the early stoppage, Wilder is legitimately winning all the rounds, right? Wilder has a jab. He understands now all he has to do during the slow action is get close enough to you, and he has a long reach, right? Get close enough to you with a side profile. That's the other thing, right? Wilder is longer than he used to be, right? All he has to do is throw a jab during lulls in the action. Folks, he's going to win those rounds. The judges are looking at him and they're saying, man, this dude's bigger than I thought. He's throwing a jab. If you're a judge and you're saying, wow, one guy was backing away, trying to avoid getting hit with a straight right. The other guy was initiating the action. I'm going to give the round to the other guy. The guy who's throwing the jab, who's initiating the action. Understand, you have the ultimate paradox here. Wilder's throwing a jab. The opponent can't think in terms of slipping the jab and coming inside, because in the early rounds, the opponent hasn't figured out the angle, and slipping Wilder's jab carries risk, right? I slipped the jab. Is this a setup where Wilder wants me to slip the jab and to move into his right hand? So Wilder's throwing a jab more than usual. More importantly, folks, he's looping his punches, right? He throws the widest left hook I know of in the heavyweight division. Folks, I want folks to look at that left hook, see how wide it is. He throws a wide right hand in addition to his sniper shot, that straight right. As I've pointed out in other videos too, he's worked on his game to the point where he's able to shorten shots. Look at the KO shot in the Hellenius fight. In fact, in the Fury third fight, look at one of the shots that put Fury down. Wilder can take you out with a short right now. He doesn't need all the space. Now, yes, it's late in his career, but this is the guy who has worked on his game, right? Just the fact that I'm talking about Wilder's left hand, right? Jab and wide hooks should have people concerned in the heavyweight division, right? I believe Anthony Joshua beats Wilder. Let's talk about an elephant in the room fight. I believe Anthony Joshua beats Wilder, but understand, Joshua needs to bring his A game to do so. If he comes in and he leaves himself open for counters like he did in the Daniel Dubois fight, right, Joshua's going to be up against it. In other words, Joshua has to train. He has to come in shape. His operating assumption, and Joshua's cautious to begin with, has to be that Wilder is prepared to go 10 or more rounds. That Wilder is going to come in great shape. That Wilder is going to be accurate. Folks, he landed some big shots. There's a reason in this Herndon fight that Herndon's moving away from him. Let me say this too, and I know folks are, thinking differently on this, right? The folklore is that Malik Scott and Wilder must have had some agreement. Right? People doubt the authenticity of Wilder's KO of Malik Scott. As if Wilder didn't knock the daylights out of countless fighters before that. And folks, you know, who, what other big punch are you going to doubt? George Foreman's? Mike Tyson's? Come on. I mean, Wilder doesn't need help in knocking out guys. But the folklore goes as follows. Right? These guys had some agreement where Malik Scott is going to become Wilder's trainer. If he lays down against Wilder, right? I know the folklore because I see it in my comment section. Right? I know there's a group out there that doubts Wilder, a guy who held a belt for 5 years. Right? The idea is that, they had an arrangement to pay off his end of the arrangement. Wilder, and this is how stupid this train of thought is, Wilder then has Scott as his trainer for several fights, literally the meat of his career. When he's fighting, the big names, the Tyson Furies, the Joe Parkers, the Zhili Zhangs, right? As if a fighter would ever say to another one, hey, look, you lay down in this fight, even though I'm the favorite in this fight, prohibitive favorite, you lay down and I'll let you control the most financially lucrative part of my career. Right? So here, I'm hearing that Herndon was a fan of Deontay Wilder. Right, folks? I have no doubt there are many fighters in the sport who are fans of other fighters. Right? I have no doubt. This shouldn't be news. I'm sure there are many guys who see Canelo and they say, hey, man, player, you're a bad man. Not that they would ever lay down against Canelo. Just that you see a gold standard fighter, Terrence Crawford, right? You see Crawford. I'm sure there are guys who've come up to Crawford who are in the game who said, hey, man, that was a great fight against Errol Spence. Right, folks? Boxing's a craft. This is no different than, tech entrepreneurs getting together and saying, hey, man, I was really impressed by that AI program you guys put out. Right? Doesn't mean that entrepreneur is going to concede the AI market. It just means that they're in the game and they know the work that it takes to get to the level of the guy they're complimenting. So, of course, the folklore on the Herndon fight is that Herndon was a fan of Deontay Wilder's. Right? Herndon looks at Wilder and, Herndon, apparently, if you believe the folklore, took a photo with Wilder years ago. Folks, I gotta tell you, Larry Holmes was a fan of Ali who gave him a big chance, right? Holmes was Ali's sparring partner. When Holmes fought Ali, they actually fought. That fight's a mismatch. Right? Be careful. Your protege wants the food on your plate. Right? I don't care if Herndon looked up to Wilder. Herndon wanted to beat Wilder yesterday. Right? Herndon is doing things to buy time so he can try to beat Wilder. But this fight showed you a few secrets. Wilder was in better shape than Herndon. I don't care what the ages are. Right? Wilder was in better shape than Herndon. Herndon did not have Wilder's stamina. As Wilder moved forward, Herndon's trying to get out of the way of Wilder's shots. But he didn't have the back foot game to deal with Wilder's jab, front foot, and looping shots. Right, so I know many have written off Wilder. I understand you have a group out there, it's fashionable, right? People love to be in groups. Lord knows that, right? Um, you have a group out there saying, oh, Wilder should retire right now. Right, folks? Wilder is still a world-class heavyweight. He's never been Mr. Fluidity. He's never been the guy who is there on his toes, moving around the ring. He's never been Ali. That's never been his game. Boxing is rock, paper, scissors. If you're a slugger and you only have to touch a guy once to get a stoppage, right? How did Foreman in his 40s win the heavyweight title? He was fighting a damn good fighter in Michael Moore, right? He landed one big shot. It wasn't even early. It was in the later part of the fight. Right, folks? With Wilder's punch, with Wilder's length, with Wilder's level of fitness, right? This is the older guy who comes in weighing 225 and a half at 6'7". Right? There's no round in this fight where Wilder's breathing out of his mouth and looks like he's taking time off. No, he's coming after you. When a 6'7" guy with a big right hand is throwing a jab, even if it's just to create space between you and him, right, folks? How are you going to deal with that? You can only try to duck under the jab on Wilder's left side, right? Because you understand, if I move out of the way of the jab into Wilder's right hand, that might be the last thing I do in the fight. Now, Wilder has legs, right? He's more active than you think. This is the guy who doesn't look like he's moving that much, but yet you notice Herndon has to back away from him to get away from him, right? You notice Herndon found himself pinned on the ropes a number of times in this fight, right? So let me say, after this Deontay Wilder fight, why play games here? Again, this is a guy who was heavyweight champ for 5 years. You and I know that if they announce a fight, Wilder against Anthony Joshua, number one, that would be one of the biggest paydays, no doubt, that Wilder has gotten in his career. Right? We can look back and we can say, oh, Wilder Fury, the first fight was interesting. Right? But understand, Fury was viewed as coming back from boxing Siberia. He hadn't fought a big name for years before that Wilder fight. And Wilder was viewed as, a less than definitive heavyweight champion. One of the secrets to economics is you can look back and say, oh, he was in his prime then. Now he's post-prime, right? I would question that because, understand, power's the last to go. Wilder still has the big punch, and he's added wrinkles to his game, right? I'm not sure if Wilder from 7 years ago beats Wilder today. And I say that after Wilder looked bad against Zhilei Zhang. Right? I say that after Wilder lost to Joe Parker. So let me just say, I don't know what world people are in who believe that a fighter who has multiple multi-million-dollar paydays, multiple, if he wants, should walk away from the sport, particularly when the guy himself hasn't taken a lot of damage. Wilder, Anthony Joshua, folks, at Wembley, that fight gets at least 40,000 fans. And you and I know I'm being conservative. I'm being very conservative. Right? If I'm Wilder, that's the fight I want next. Why would I be fighting a lot of lesser guys who can't deliver the purse that a Anthony Joshua can? Right? Understand too, that's a fight both guys could win. Let's say they have a spirited matchup where both guys get hit with shots, both guys have to survive adversity. Let's say both guys even get knocked down. Right, folks? After that fight, you might want to see more of both men. Isn't that what happened with Hagler-Hearns? Right? An argument can be said that Hearns, who comes out against the middleweight champion, Hearns wasn't even a middleweight at the time, and has the idea that he's going to go toe-to-toe with Marvin Hagler. And, of course, the end result is one of the best first rounds in history. Right? An argument can be made that that's Thomas Hearns' best moment as a pro. And understand, Hearns is the guy who lost the fight. Let's remember, too, that's that rare fight where Marvin Hagler actually gets cut and is bleeding. Right? By his own admission, Hagler was afraid they were going to stop the fight on him. If Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder have that level of fight right now, they would be in the heavyweight mix for years. You know that. Also, let's face it too. As much as we love Alexander Usyk, there's going to be a changing of the guard at heavyweight. Right? Understand the way... I'm not saying that Usyk necessarily loses his next fight. Right? Daniel Dubois has a puzzle he needs to solve. He had problems with Usyk's jab. It was a right hand, right, in the first fight. Dubois is going to have to show us that he has a game plan for that. If he doesn't, let's remember, after Usyk gets off the canvas, he dominates the fight. Let's also remember, Dubois is the opposite of the Dubois who beats Filip Ergovic. Dubois is low volume before the knockdown in his fight against Usyk. But let's be real, Usyk's in his late 30s, and unlike sluggers, right, unlike an Anthony Joshua, unlike a Deontay Wilder, Usyk really is relying on coordination. Right, folks? That's what Father Time catches up with first. Right? There's going to be the fight. We haven't seen it yet because he's one of the best athletes in the heavyweight division. But there's going to be the fight where Usyk comes out and he's not going to look as elusive as he's looked. Right? He's not going to look as nimble as he's looked. Let's face it. Father Time has caught up somewhat with Tyson Fury. Hasn't it? Right? Fury doesn't look like the fighter who, wins at least 8 rounds against Vladimir Klitschko. Right? Well, Usyk doesn't have the challenges that it looks like Tyson Fury had. Right? The emotional highs and lows, the investigation, on PEDs by the powers that be over British boxing. Right? But understand, 38, a guy who relies on speed, legs, reflexes, moving around the ring, creating space, that starts to go. I'm sure Joe Parker is just waiting for the phone to ring. Right? Waiting for the Usyk people to call him and say, Joe, you know, will you fight our man? Joe probably says yes before the sentence is completed. Right? There's going to be a changing of the guard at heavyweight. There already has been to some degree. Right, folks? The Daniel Dubois, I mentioned Dubois, he has a share of the title. Right? He has a big punch. He stopped Jarrell Miller. Right? He stopped Philippe Ergovic. Right? I mentioned Dubois because, of course, he's one of the bright lights in the heavyweight division right now. The Dubois who fought Philippe Ergovic got hit with how many right hands? Please, look at that tape. That's all I ask. Look at the tape. Look at the right hands. Ask yourself, is there a moment in that fight where you privately thought to yourself, he's getting hit with too many right hands? Isn't that the recipe for disaster against Deontay Wilder? Right? When is the fight that you've seen a guy get hit with as many right hands as Dubois gets hit with by Ergovic? Where is the fight involving Deontay Wilder, where Wilder has landed that many right hands and the other guy hasn't been knocked unconscious like Dominic Brazil was? Right, folks? Wilder has an opening. It's there. Right? He lost 2 fights because the promoter delivered value to the viewer by putting together tough fights for both guys. Right? Zhilei Zhang had to be on his P's and Q's against Deontay Wilder. Right? Joseph Parker had to be on his P's and Q's against Deontay Wilder. Folks, Parker and Zhang are 2 of the hardest opponents who could have been matched against Wilder. What about the rest of the heavyweight division? Right? Let's just say Martin Bakole got decked by Joe Parker off what, a long right hand? Right now, I think Bacole's one of the most dangerous heavyweights. I still believe that. But let's get real. If Joe Parker was able to land a long right on Martin Bakole and knock him down, don't you think there's the possibility that Deontay Wilder could do the same thing? Right? So, I don't know how many other fighters are in the sport who people are going to be saying, he should retire, who have as many possible big fights on their plate as Deontay Wilder. Understand, too, Wilder has a name. Right? I'm positive today, for all the buzz Moses Atama has gotten, for all the buzz Fabio Wardley has gotten, I think the casual fan out on the street knows Deontay Wilder's name a lot more than those names. Right? So Wilder actually has the option, which Tyson Fury is using right now, of taking a prolonged time between fights. Because understand, the public already knows him. You don't have to build the name. Wilder doesn't need to fight anything other than the biggest fights right now. Right? So I know the boxing crowd is tough. Right? They, if, we allow vets in other sports to actually have, the back nine, to actually play the full golf course. Right? LeBron James just had a season on a 50-win team where he had a negative plus minus. And there isn't the huge outcry, except from Paul Pierce, for LeBron to retire. Right? We understand, this guy still has game left. Not only that, we understand LeBron in the right situation. might be able to go extremely deep in the playoffs. In fact, his team recently was in the playoffs, not this last year, but maybe a year or two back. His team got to the conference finals recently, right? Boxing with a 38-year-old champ has a crowd out there that wants Deontay Wilder to immediately retire. Folks, he's in the gym. Right? The secret to Ray Leonard late in his career, and let's be clear here, Ray at one point beats the light heavyweight champion, Donnie Lalonde. Right? The secret to Ray Leonard was that Ray always kept himself in shape. Right? In which fight did you look at Deontay Wilder and think he was out of shape? Folks, he was in spectacular shape here. I was watching him in the 6th and 7th rounds. By the way, I have the fight. I posted the fight yesterday in my favorites folder. I hope it's still there. It's definitely worth a look. Right, folks? Wilder is in shape. He's adding wrinkles to his game. I consider his work on looping punches, which he couldn't do early on, right? I consider that to be adding a lot to his game, right? Now fighters have to think about the angles. Because Wilder himself is outsized, right? He's 6'7". When he loops that left, I mean, look how wide it is. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of guys who see the left coming, move out of the way, then realize they're not out of the way. Right? The fact that he could shorten his right hand now, right? The Hellenius fight, again, folks, it's on film. You don't even have to watch the fight that closely. You see the knockout and then back up the film and say, let me watch this knockout again. How much extension does Wilder get on the punch? Right, folks, if he's shortening that lethal bazooka that he has on his right shoulder and can knock you out with it, he's not only a dangerous man right now, he's still world class. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Folks, we're in a heavyweight division where you have several guys who are world class who aren't defensively blessed. Did anyone look at how many times Fabio Wardley got hit by Justice Hune? Right, folks, David Adelaide, look where his hands are. When you watch a David Adelaide fight, are you there looking at it and thinking, my goodness, this guy's defensively blessed? Is that your thought process? Dubois has a share of the heavyweight title. Wasn't that him getting riddled with right hands by right-handed Filip Ergovic? Right, folks? In this heavyweight division, and it's a deep heavyweight division, in this heavyweight division, right, folks, Wilder still has a chance for at least, well, he's already earned at least another huge payday. Right? As I said, if they were to announce Wilder AJ, that's a huge fight. That's a huge fight. Right? As I mentioned earlier too, Wilder, of course, could fight for the Bridgerweight title if he wanted to. Right? You just saw Gilberto Ramirez, right, beat Uniel Dorticos in a cruiserweight title fight. Ramirez, by his own admission, walks around several pounds heavier. Right? A Ramirez-Wilder fight would be intriguing because Ramirez, of course, is one of the best body punchers in the sport. But how can you comfortably get inside on Deontay Wilder? Right? I'll concede. Gilberto Ramirez is probably more skilled than Wilder. But he doesn't have that one punch, trump card that Wilder has, right? Also, Gilberto Ramirez, who deals on angles, right? Who sets things up so you throw a left hook and it just passes him. Against an unorthodox Wilder who's throwing a Wilder left hook, would Ramirez figure out the angles to avoid getting hit with shots? I thought Dorticos won some of the early rounds yesterday, right? Let's just say Wilder's, to me, is in position for some excellent fights against some major talents, right? As I said, I think Joshua beats him, but Joshua would have to be ready for the fight, wouldn't he? Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. I'm aware that there's a huge crowd out there, huge crowd, that questions Wilder, right, folks? Just like there's a huge crowd that has Google's PE below 20 right now, right? And I'm telling you, the Google investors have been enjoying this run, right? There's always that crowd that wants to be part of a crowd and wants to criticize a brand, right? The question here is, in which heavyweight division are they operating, right? You're telling me some of these heavyweights who've been stopped, right? Jared Anderson, stopped by Martin Bakole. Martin Bakole, stopped by Joe Parker. Folks, that's the heavyweight division we're in, right? I love Moses Atama. How tall is he? Right, 6'3" or shorter? Wouldn't Wilder have a huge reach advantage? I'm not saying Wilder beats Atama, right? But wouldn't a lot of Atama's game, where he's, throwing punches, but he has a reserve. He actually has faster hand speed, where he's able to hurt you and then jump and change all the angles, right? Wouldn't part of Atama's game be challenged by the longer angles involved in fighting Deontay Wilder? Right, folks, I think Wilder's still viable. Let me hear from you in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.